A colored widow keepin' a ranch afloat? The words drifted from Eden Hollow's market, carried by the wind straight to the porch, where a woman strained to hold together what her dead husband left behind. The cattle pens begged for a man's hand, the fences sagged, the bank pressed for payment, and the Carter kin circled like vultures over every acre. Yet the true shock came when a stranger cowboy stepped through her gate, asking for work in exchange for bread and a bed. What should have been salvation soon lit a blaze of gossip. The town murmured, "She feeds a man with her husband's fortune." Rumors spread like prairie fire, turning Selena from a woman of grit into the butt of their jeers. In that storm, the shadow of the cowboy stood uncertain. Was he her anchor or the snare that would drag her under? The June sun in Eden Hollow beat down like fire. At high noon, the red earth breathed heat. Dust hung heavy over the lone road that led to the Carter ranch. On the wooden porch, Selena Carter sat still, a cold cup of coffee in her hands. Her lips were cracked, but she didn't drink. The cup was only an excuse to keep her hands from trembling, a reminder that the day still had to go on. Since the day Jacob, her husband, fell beneath a horse's hooves, this house had gone without the sound of a man. The cattle pens knew only one weary figure now. Every task once shared by two hands had dropped squarely onto her shoulders, swinging gates, twisting rope, hauling straw, hammering nails into rotted fence posts. Each night when she lay down, the strain pulled through her back like a stone pressed hard against her bones. Yet each morning, the wind chimes rang, the herd bellowed, and she rose again. The townsfolk whispered, "A colored widow keep a ranch alive?" The words didn't need to be shouted. Once spoken, they spread like smoke. In the market, Selena felt the quick glance and the quicker turn away. In church, the bench beside her was often left empty. No one had to drive her out. Silence was exile enough. She knew she was seen through two frames, a widow and a black woman. The frame was so tight, it choked the breath. All she wanted was to do the work like anyone else, yet every step carried the hiss of whispers at her back. To others, she was both pitiful and suspect. The wind stirred, laying dust on the hem of her work dress. The coarse cloth was faded, the edge frayed. Her hair was tied high, a few strands damp with sweat. On her wrist, a raw cut from barbed wire burned where she had replaced a fence post that very morning. The work didn't wait for any man's return. The work cared only for whoever still had strength. She set the cup down, listening to the sounds that proved life still clung here. A calf bawling for its mother, the stall door creaking, sparrows darting and vanishing in a blink. They were proof the ranch still breathed, even if its master lay beneath 3 seasons of rain. Every time Jacob's name surfaced in her mind, a weight pressed down. They'd had no children. 3 years of marriage left behind nothing but blurred photographs, a leather coat on a peg, a pair of boots gathering dust. Folks said her luck was cursed, a woman marked for grief. Selena didn't argue. In Eden Hollow, another's sorrow was always someone else's judgment. Yet grief alone was not enough. She had to guard the land against the eyes that circled. The Carter kin, Isaac above all, had hinted more than once that she couldn't manage alone. They didn't need to speak plain. A sneer was enough. Cattle look lean this season, or hard to keep ground when the creek runs dry. Words soft as dull blades, cutting just the same. She knew if she faltered, they would sweep in. their claims made legal soon after. In the bank ledger, a date was already circled. If the harvest brought no fair price, she'd have to mortgage. Then Isaac would only need to reach out his hand. Her eyes traced the far ridge, the sunlight flashing off stone like broken glass. In the wide sky, in the endless land, she still felt cornered, not by walls, but by stairs, by rumor, by skin that no one let her wash away. Still, she would not leave. This was Jacob's sweat in the soil, his parents' hands in the planks of the house. Every blade of grass, every steer knew her step here. To walk away was to erase herself from memory. Better to spend herself dry than hand it to the greedy. A gust carried grit across the porch. Selina closed her eyes, breathing the hot earth. For a fleeting second, she wished for another hand beside her, not to take the work, only to share the silence. The wish flickered and died quick. She'd taught herself not to hope. Hope was shards, and she'd swallowed too many already. The sun slid west, gold light stretching shadows across the boards. The chime rang soft, bits of clay knocking together like a reminder that life beat on. Selina lifted the cup again, sipped the bitter cold. The taste ran down sharp, as familiar as toil. She set it back down, her spine straight. Evening shadows gathered across the porch, and in that quiet she told herself, steady as prayer, "Stand, Selina. No matter what, you stand." Heat shimmered above the red road of Eden Hollow, dust rising in the cruel blaze of noon. From the porch, Selina narrowed her eyes, watching the wavering line where earth met sky. Out of the haze a rider took shape, his horse's hooves striking a steady rhythm that made her pulse climb with each beat. For months, that road had carried nothing but timber wagons and the rare neighbor passing through. A stranger at this hour was not the sort of sight she expected. As the horse drew close, she saw the man plain. Tall in the saddle, shoulders broad, coat worn to thread, dust clinging from collar to hem. When he reined in before the gate, he tipped his hat, his voice even and low. "My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm passing through. I heard you might need a hand. I ask no more than supper and a place to rest." The porcelain in her grasp creaked under her grip. A gust carried grit between her collar and skin, stinging sharp. Before her stood a cowboy stranger, beard trimmed neat, eyes the color of ash, calm as still water. His boots bore cracks and scars, but the saddle and horse beneath him were solid, well kept, not the trappings of a drifter begging for scraps. Selina rose from the porch, her voice steady. "I didn't send word for help." Daniel's smile flickered and was gone. "I stopped at the little station down by town. Folks there said Carter Ranch was running short of men. I've done most every chore, driving cattle, cutting ditches, setting fence posts. I work quiet, and I work hard." Her breath caught. That depot had been closed for years, only a few boxcars rusting in the weeds. Who had pointed him here? Suspicion stirred, but so did truth. The ranch was bleeding for labor. Since Jacob's death, hired men had drifted off. Some wanted steady pay elsewhere. Others wanted no part of a widow marked by gossip. She was left with her own calloused hands and a herd that needed tending. She folded her arms, her dark gaze fixed on the man before her. "If I let you stay, you'll have supper, a cot in the old bunkhouse. No wages till the cattle sell." Daniel nodded without pause. "That's enough. I'm not after pay today. I'm after a place to work and a place to belong." The words struck something inside her. A place to belong. Since when did any man see belonging on this ground, when even Jacob's kin looked on it with disdain? She forced the thought down. Strangers came and strangers left. She'd trained herself not to hope. "Fine," she said at last. "There's a stall behind. Bunkhouse on the left. Clean it yourself." Daniel tipped his hat again, polite without pretension. "Much obliged, ma'am." He led the horse through the gate with an unhurried gait, sure as if he knew he'd found where he ought to be. Selina's eyes followed the tall frame and the powerful animal at his side. She didn't notice until the gate closed that her breath was still uneven. Inside, she set the cup down, her hand trembling. Memories surged. Jacob's fall, the murmur of townsfolk, nights she barred the door alone. Now another man stepped across her threshold, carrying eyes she could not read. She shook her head. "Don't falter, Selina." By late day, while hauling water from the well, she glimpsed Daniel at work. He had stripped the saddle, brushed the horse, set hay in the stall. Every motion was practiced, quiet, needing no instruction. He did not look her way, did not ask. Oddly, the sight eased a corner of her burden. Yet unease pooled too. Should she have let a stranger cross into the home that echoed only her own footsteps? The ranch was Jacob's legacy, each choice of hers judged with suspicion. If word spread she'd taken in a man, gossip would sprout like weeds after rain. She set down the pails, sitting hard on the porch step. The sky deepened to copper, sunset washing the ridge in red. In the wind she heard them already, the mutter of the market women, the jeers of men in the saloon, a colored widow taking in a man. The words weren't spoken yet, but she heard them as clear as bells. Her teeth pressed to her lip. She had faced scorn before, but this would be sharper. Once the stranger stayed, all eyes would be on her. Across the yard, the bunkhouse flickered with lamplight, his silhouette tall against the wall. He moved steady, no hesitation, as though roots had already set. Selina lingered at the door, the weight of foreboding heavy. Perhaps his coming was a mercy. Perhaps it was the first crack of a storm. She shut the door soft, the thought pressing hard. The seed of rumor has already been sown. News rode faster than the wind. Barely a night had passed since Daniel Hayes laid his bedroll in the old bunkhouse, and already every tongue in Eden Hollow had turned to the matter of a colored widow harboring a stranger cowboy. No one dared say it to Selina's face, but the next morning, as she drove her wagon into town for salt and cornmeal, the eyes upon her told her enough. Rumor had already taken root. The market stretched along the dirt road that cut through town, framed by rough-hewn wooden stalls. Mornings were thick with sound, hens clucking, wagon wheels creaking, the sharp cry of mule drivers. The air carried the scent of cornbread fresh from the griddle tangled with the rank of horse manure. Selina stepped down, basket swinging lightly at her side. Yet the instant her boots touched the street, she felt the weight of glances. 3 women bent over a crate of greens froze mid-motion. One leaned close to whisper, another looked up, met Selina's eyes, and let a smirk curl before lowering her head again. Across the road, a cluster of men lounged outside the saloon, their laughter sudden and hollow as she passed. She caught enough of a jest. "Carter Place is boarding saddle tramps now." Then a second voice, sharper. "Bet he's got night work, too." Their mirth split the air, dry as boards cracking in the sun. Selina kept her chin tucked, pace quickened, but heat burned in her ears. Every step grew heavier, her boots sinking into the red dust as though into shame itself. She longed to walk tall, to stride as though above reproach, yet her shoulders locked, and the silence of contempt clung to her skirts like dust no hand could shake free. At the salt stall, the old shopwoman laid down her bundles without looking up. Her voice flat, her tone cool. "Salt's 5 cents, cornmeal 10." Selina placed the coins. When the woman reached for them, her fingers angled deliberately to avoid touching hers. Selina saw it clear, but answered with silence. At the cloth stall nearby, two young girls pretended to measure fabric while their eyes fixed on her. One murmured, just loud enough, "Colored women are all the same. Sooner or later, one drags a man home." The other giggled. "Best way to hold the land, isn't it? Else she'd lose it all." Selina's grip tightened on the basket. She did not turn. To turn was to meet their scorn head-on, to risk words she might spit in anger, words the town craved to use as proof against her. So she walked on, each step heavy as though across shifting sand. Old memories struck. The day Jacob died, the black shawl pulled tight in church. Her place in the pew met with silence instead of condolence. No voice had offered sympathy, only eyes that read her tragedy as judgment, as if heaven itself had closed its hand against a black woman's prayer. She had sworn that day never to be seen falling. And yet now, a single man's arrival had loosed the same storm of eyes upon her again at the Kuon general store. She reached for lamp oil. The keeper, once Jacob's acquaintance, set the bottle down harder than need be, cleared his throat, turned his back. At the door, two men paused mid-stride, eyes roaming her figure. One sneered, "Heard Carter Place's got new help. He any good, Mrs. Carter?" Her jaw locked. She paid, gathered her parcel, walked out. No retort, no glance. She knew the game. The more she gave, the deeper they'd cut. Yet silence offered no shield. Silence only made her a wall to catch their stones. The wagon jolted homeward, wheels thudding into ruts. Selina clenched the reins, her mind crowded with echoes, snickers, whispers, the scrape of insult against pride. Each word a pin driven deeper, and always her thoughts circled back to Daniel. She pictured him the evening before, brushing down his horse, laying hay neat in the stall, quiet as shadow. Perhaps he didn't know, or perhaps he simply didn't care, that his presence had turned her into the favorite subject of every idle tongue in Eden Hollow. Should she have let him stay? The question gnawed relentless. She needed hands. No woman alone could drive cattle, patch ditches, guard land against grasping kin. Yet the cost was this: whispers like thorns, eyes like nails pressing at her back. The fields stretched out as she neared home, brittle gold beneath the noon glare. She drew a deep breath, chest tight, and remembered Jacob's father. The man who had hammered these walls once told her, "Land betrays no one. Only men betray the land." The words struck like a brand. To abandon this soil, to let gossip and kin Swopyeon tear it apart, would be to let Jacob die twice. Humiliation weighed heavy, but beneath it ran a taut line of resolve. She would keep the land, no matter the eyes, no matter the lies. If Daniel's labor was the price of that, she would pay it. Turning into the lane, the porch rose into view. Beyond the corral, she caught sight of him, straightening a sagging latch on the stall door. He glanced up, ash-gray eyes meeting hers. No questions, no comments, only a short nod, firm as iron. He was here to work, nothing more. Selina stepped down from the wagon, the basket heavy in her hands. The dust of the market clung still, but the sight lent a faint lift within her. For all the town's whispers, perhaps she was not utterly alone. Yet truth remained, inescapable. The seed of rumor had been sown, and it would grow faster than any crop she might plant in her fields. Inside Eden Hollow's lone saloon, the lamplight swayed dim and yellow, glinting through the haze of cigar smoke and the sour tang of old beer. Men laughed rough, mugs clattered, dice rolled across scarred wood. Yet one figure sat apart, quieter than the rest. Isaac Carter, cousin to the late Jacob, leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed at a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. The news had reached him by sunrise. The colored widow had taken in a stray cowboy at Carter Ranch. When he heard it, Isaac's lip curled into a smile, part sneer, part triumph. "The more she shows weakness," he muttered low enough for the man beside him to hear, "the easier it'll be to take that ranch back." The fellow snorted, shook the dice in his palm. "Widows cling to men, Isaac. That land'll be yours soon enough." Isaac nodded, though his gaze darkened. To him, Carter Ranch was more than soil. It was pride, stolen years ago when Jacob's father left the best acres to his son and cast Isaac off with a patch of barren hillside. From that day, Isaac had carried the wound, vowing one day to claim what should have been his. Now the chance lay before him. Jacob dead, his widow despised, whispered about in every corner of town. Isaac knew the way Eden Hollow worked. The people here loved stories more than truth. Feed them suspicion, and it would sprout like weeds after rain. By the forge, he hinted that Daniel was a fugitive out of Texas. At the bakery, he let slip that Selina paid him in other favors. Each lie slid smooth as a snake. He needed only days before the town would echo with his poison. That evening, Isaac left the saloon and strode down the dusted street. The sun carved hard lines into his face, but the smile lingered. In his mind, he measured each step ahead. At home, the shadows clung to the corners of his small wooden house. A chest lay open, its contents a mess of old Carter papers he'd rifled through a dozen times hunting for some loophole. Each failure only deepened his spite. By lamplight, his face sharpened. High cheekbones, narrow eyes, a smile like a knife blade. He drew out a scrap of parchment, dipped his pen in ink, and began to practice the strokes of a dead man's name. Over and over, Jacob Carter's signature took shape beneath his hand until the forgery looked easy as truth. "If the town needs a reason to strip her of the land," he whispered, "I'll give them one." Out at the ranch, Selina bent to her tasks, blind to the schemes weaving in the dark. Daniel had mended the north fence, set order to the stalls. She saw him labor without complaint, steady as stone. Yet within her unease grew. Rumors no longer drifted like scattered whispers. They stood around her like walls whenever she stepped beyond her door. She knew Isaac. He was the shadow behind those watchful eyes, the hidden hand behind the town's sneers. Even while Jacob lived, Isaac had claimed the land should stay in the family. Now, with her alone, he would circle closer. Selina sat by the hearth that night, the fire licking the wood slow and low. All Jacob left her, house, herd, land, demanded not only toil, but will. Still, she felt the town waiting for her stumble, ready to call her ruin God's will. She could not hear Isaac's plotting, but she sensed it, like the air before a storm, when the leaves shiver though the sky is clear. Later that night, Isaac returned to the saloon, this time with 3 burly men who had once worked his fields. Their table filled with cups, their laughter rolled crude. Isaac spoke smooth, telling them the ranch was as good as lost, that the widow would sell soon, and he would be the one to set things right. "And if she won't?" one asked. Isaac's smile bent sharp. "Who in this town trusts her? A colored widow keeping a spread that size? All it takes is a few missing cattle, a signature or two. That'll be enough." The men roared, their mirth clashing with the twang of a banjo in the corner, making a discordant hymn to their schemes. Isaac leaned back, eyes half closed, already picturing the scene. Selina broken in the dust, while he rose as rightful heir. Night fell quick over Eden Hollow, the lamps dimming one by one. But in Isaac Carter's mind, the flame of ambition burned brighter than any light the town could muster. At first light, before the sun had cleared the ridge, the ring of hammer on iron carried across the north fence line. Selina stepped out onto the porch, shawl drawn close, and saw the stranger bent low, driving new posts where the old had rotted through. She had mentioned it only in passing the night before. Now, without being told, Daniel Hayes was already at work. His horse stood tied neat at the gate while he tugged rusted wire loose, patient and steady, not a word of complaint. He worked the morning through. From a distance she watched, suspicion still heavy in her gaze. But soon she noted the way he set each post square, stretched the wire taut, buried it firm as if he'd built fences his whole life. His hands were browned and scarred by sun, his motions certain. Sweat darkened his shirt, yet his face stayed calm. There was no boasting, no empty talk, only the work itself. Oddly, that quiet steadiness comforted her more than any promise might have. By afternoon, he had moved to the irrigation ditch, long choked with mud. The channel that once carried water to the pastures had narrowed to a trickle. Daniel rolled his trousers and stepped in, shovel biting into the packed earth. Selina stood above on the bank, memory tugging. Jacob had cleared that same ditch once, grumbling the whole time, angry at the drudgery. Daniel was different. Only the scrape of shovel, the splash of mud, and now and then a faint crooked smile when sweat dripped from his brow to the tip of his nose. Evening brought her to the rear paddock. The stallion there had been nothing but trouble, snapping, kicking, driving off any man who dared near. She had grown used to its rage filling the mornings, but this time she froze. Daniel was inside the stall itself, one hand firm on the rope, the other stroking the beast's neck. His voice rolled low and steady, almost a lullaby. The horse still blew hot through its nostrils, but it did not strike. It stood, uneasy but still. The sight startled Selina so deeply she forgot to speak. For the first time in many weeks, the stall carried only breath, not violence. The day slipped past quicker than most. When night fell, she kindled the kitchen fire. She was accustomed to meals meant for one: cornmeal porridge, a scrap of dried meat. But tonight her hands hesitated, then reached for an extra bowl, an extra spoon. They trembled as she set 2 places at the small table. She said nothing of it, only kept to the stove. Daniel entered, the scent of sweat and dust following him, but his face washed clean, hair brushed back. He paused, uncertain at the sight of the table already laid. "Thank you," he said simply. They ate in silence. Now and then she glanced sideways, noting how he bent over the bowl, unhurried, without pretense or chatter. No false compliments, only the quiet hunger of a man who respected what was placed before him. For the first time in many months, the kitchen did not echo with emptiness. Clearing the dishes, Selina felt her pulse quicken. That small act, setting one more place, was a step across a line she had not dared since Jacob's death. In the plainness of the meal, she realized she had opened a crack in her guard for another soul. It frightened her, yet lifted something heavy from her chest. Later, at the window, she looked out across the yard. A dim lamp burned in the bunkhouse. His shadow moved against the wall, hands still busy with rope. She sat long by the sill, her own hand resting on the table beside her. It felt like letting go, and like beginning. For the first time since the long season of mourning, the house no longer felt entirely empty. That morning, the sun had not yet dried the dew from the grass when commotion broke from the pasture. Selina, cloak thrown hastily over her shoulders, strode across the yard, her boots sinking in damp red earth. At the corral, her chest seized tight. Several head of cattle were gone. The gate rope was sliced clean, hoofprints pressed bold into the soil, almost as if someone had left them to be found. She gripped the rail hard enough her knuckles blanched. Breath roared in her ears, drowning all but the words she knew would soon spread. She can't even hold her herd. Cattle were not just coin, they were the very breath of the ranch. To lose 3 at once was a wound deep and raw. Daniel came up behind, shirt slung over one shoulder, the scent of morning still clinging to him. His eyes swept the fence, hardened in an instant. "I'll track them," he said, voice firm. Selina turned, meaning to nod, but her throat locked. Shame and fear swelled fast. She saw already the market's mocking faces, the whispers waiting to bloom. Carter Ranch won't last the season. Daniel set a hand against the fence post, meeting her eyes. "I know how to follow sign. They won't be far. We've got a chance if we go now." The word we caught her short. For so long, every burden had fallen on her alone. Now another stood beside her, ready to shoulder it, as though the land were his too. She drew a breath, nodded once. "Then we ride. But remember, Eden Hollow holds more than dust and stone. It holds eyes waiting to see me fall." Daniel gave no reply, only tightened the cinch and swung the saddle into place. Selina knotted a kerchief at her throat, slung the rifle across her back. As they left the yard, she cast one look behind, toward the cabin where the hearth still smoldered warm. She felt the step heavy, as though she were riding into battle, not with the land, but with the malice of men. They followed the trail through weeded flats and dry creek beds. Daniel dismounted often, kneeling to study torn grass or a scrape along stone. Selina rode silent, eyes sweeping the hills she thought she knew, yet which now felt hostile. Cattle did not vanish on their own. Someone had waited for the chance. And in her mind, only one name formed: Isaac. By mid-morning they reached a low rise. Daniel crouched, pointing to a line of deeper imprints among the herd's trail. "Driven," he said. "No accident." Selina's jaw clenched, breath sharp in her chest. The confirmation was no relief, only a seal upon her dread. Someone meant to shame her. "Can you bring them back?" she asked, voice rough. He looked up, sun casting his features stark, ash-gray eyes flaring with a steadiness she had not known in years. "I've never spoken a promise I couldn't keep." For a moment, something eased in her. Yet when she turned and glimpsed the far-off haze above the town, she knew the news was already alive. One sight of the cut fence and Eden Hollow would carry the tale from doorstep to saloon. Rumor needed no rain to grow. They pressed on until a narrow hollow crowded with brush opened before them. There, the missing cattle milled restless, not yet driven far. Relief surged at the sight, though the sting of humiliation remained. Daniel swung down, whip snapping sharp, driving the animals back toward the trail. Selina followed on foot, rifle ready, scanning the thickets for lurking thieves. No figure showed. Whoever cut the fence had wanted sign, not fight. When the herd was once more inside the rails, Selina dropped onto the fence beam, sweat soaking her back. Daniel leaned his weight against the post, exhaling slow. "They wanted you disgraced," he said, "but we brought them home." Her eyes rose, rimmed red. "You know who they are." He gave no answer. Silence, but heavy with meaning. Overhead the sun burned white, draping the ranch in relentless gold. Dust clung to her hem, shame clung just the same. Yet this time, when she rose, she did not stand alone. A man stood beside her, quiet, certain, and in his gaze lay a vow no tongue needed to form. Selina tightened the rope in her hands. She knew this was only the beginning. Isaac had played his first card, and she, with Daniel, would have to steel themselves for all the rest. Night dropped over Eden Hollow with a strange chill. A thin moon hung pale across the sky, just enough to silver the fresh hoofprints pressed into hard ground. Daniel knelt low, fingers brushing the deep cuts in the soil, marks driven hurried and hard. He looked up and gave Selina a single nod. "They drove them toward the ridge," he murmured. Selina swallowed dry, hand clenched around the revolver at her hip. Since Jacob's death, she had never ridden out at night to follow a trail. But this was no simple theft. It was her honor on the line. Together they mounted and pressed along the stony track. Hooves echoed sharp in the stillness, carried with the wind's whistle through cactus and scrub. Every so often Daniel slid from the saddle, studying bent grass or a rock scarred with a hurried strike. Selina watched, struck by the calm in his movements, the practiced eye of a man who had made a life of tracking. Near the slope they caught it, a faint ball drifting across the dark. Daniel raised a hand, and they froze, listening, hearts in the hush. "They're close," he breathed. Selina's pulse hammered, sweat chill along her spine. They edged their horses round a stand of brush and saw him. A wiry cowhand, shoulders hunched, was pushing 3 head down the incline. In the moonlight, his movements showed strain, jerking at the sound of hoofbeats behind him. Selina urged her horse forward, voice cutting clear. "Let them go, now!" The man whipped round, eyes flashing shock and spite. He lashed his whip once, but before the crack sounded, Daniel closed in, one hand clamping the reins, the other seizing the rope. Selina leveled her gun, tone iron. "I won't ask twice." The air thickened. The man spat a curse, dropped the lead rope. The cattle bawled, pulling back, bunching together as though waiting for a familiar hand. In that pause, Daniel stepped nearer, palm brushing the flank of the lead steer. His brow furrowed. Under the moon's wash, a brand shone crooked on the hide, burned backward, sloppy. Not Jacob's mark, not Selina's. A clumsy forgery. "They wanted false proof," Daniel said low, just for her ear. Selina stiffened, pistol steady, breath quick. The truth slid sharp into her chest. This was not theft, but a staged show. Someone had planned to claim her herd mixed, mismanaged, lost to neglect. And in her heart, one name rang like a bell: Isaac. She faced the drover, words cold. "Speak. Who sent you?" He bared his teeth, a dry laugh. "I take wages. The one paying, well, you know better than me." The half-answer twisted her deeper, but she pressed no more. She only drew herself tall, voice like steel. "Leave this land. Come again, and I'll not spare warning." His glare burned, then he spurred off into the dark, vanishing beyond the ridge. Only the cattle's heavy breath remained, mingling with the hiss of wind through dead grass. Selina lowered her gun, shoulders trembling, unsure if from fury or release. Daniel tied the rope firm, met her eyes. "See? This wasn't carelessness. This was a plot." She bit her lip, gaze drawn to the valley below where moonlight lay like spilled silver. The shame of that morning hardened into fire. For the first time she felt less the widow standing alone against mockery, and more a fighter with a comrade at her side. Daniel had not only brought the herd back, he had shown her the hand moving against her. They drove the cattle home in silence. Their shadows stretched long across the pale earth, keeping step with the heavy tread of the herd. Each sound in the dark hammered the truth. This was only the beginning. When the lamps of the ranch flickered into view, Selina tightened her grip on the reins. She spoke only to herself, but her heart burned with the words. "Isaac, you can sow your lies, but you will not break me." The night in Eden Hollow seemed to stretch longer than most. By the time Selina and Daniel finally pressed the cattle back into their corral, the eastern sky had already taken on the color of ash. The animals stood heaving, sweat dark on their hides, their heavy breaths filling the yard. Selina unfastened the ropes, her hands trembling as she counted them, her fingers brushing the crooked brand burned into the flank of the lead steer. Each glance at it reminded her of Isaac, his shadow, his plotting. Daniel said little. He only fastened the gate tight and made a slow circuit of the fence, eyes sharp as a wolf's. When satisfied, he gave her a single nod. But she knew well enough. Returning the herd was only a small victory. Rumor had already raced faster than hooves, and rumor left no tracks a tracker could follow. They parted without words. Selina trudged into the house, every muscle stiff with ache. When she shut the door and sank onto the kitchen bench, it felt as though a stone had been laid upon her chest. She watched the lamp flicker weak, listened to her heart pound, and knew what dawn would bring. Whispers, smirks, the phrase carried from market to church. Carter Ranch lost cattle. Truth did not matter. People remembered what they wished to believe. Sleep would not come. She lay staring at the rafters, the dark pressing close, the sound of wind in the yard carrying the restless clang of the wind chime. Each hollow note struck her with the same question. Will I hold this place tomorrow? Near midnight, faint hoofbeats stirred in the yard. Selina sat upright, hand darting to the revolver at her bedside. Her heart rattled as she listened. Footsteps crossed the porch and stopped just outside her door. Silence. Then 3 knocks, measured, steady, without threat. "Who is it?" she called, voice hoarse. "Daniel," came the low reply, calm as daylight. She cracked the door. Moonlight spilled in, framing him there, holding a coil of rope freshly braided. The scent of hay and sweat clung to him. He held it out. "The herd'll be safer with this," he said, voice sure but quiet. I want you to know I carry the burden too. For a moment she only stared. In the pale light, his face was drawn firm, gray eyes lit steady in the dark. No fine vow, no grand promise, just rope, bound by hand and time. She reached to take it, her fingers brushing his. Warmth and chill crossed in an instant. Something flickered in her chest, not the flare of quick desire, but the gentler spark of shared weight. For the first time in months, she felt her load shift, if only by a fraction. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. Daniel tipped his hat, said nothing more, and turned into the shadows. Soon the beat of hooves faded down the road. Selina leaned against the frame, the rope heavy in her hand. Such a small thing, yet greater than 100 empty words. It meant she was no longer holding everything alone. She set it on the table, sat down again. The lamp cast her shadow thin against the wood wall, but the shadow no longer shook as before. Somewhere inside, she knew a crack had opened in the fortress she had built around herself, and through it, light had begun to seep. The night was still long, but the weariness weighed less. Selina folded her arms on the table and let her eyes close. For the first time since grief fell on her, she slept without the taste of solitude. The noon sun poured hard upon Eden Hollow's main road, the heat heavy on the backs of men and beasts. Market day swelled fuller than usual, wagons jammed wheel to wheel, the air alive with brays, whinnies, and the calls of traders. Selina came only for a sack of salt and a bolt of cloth. But the moment her boots struck the dust, she felt it. The eyes of the crowd drawn not to her, but to a single figure standing bold before the saloon. Isaac Carter. He wore a long black coat with the collar sharp at his neck, his mouth curled in that smug half-smile. In his hand he held a scroll bound with red ribbon. His voice rang loud, made to carry above the market's din. "I have something to declare. The will of my cousin, Jacob Carter." The noise hushed at once, as though water had been thrown on the fire. Selina froze, a stabbing in her chest. Slowly, Isaac untied the ribbon, eyes sweeping the crowd before reading. "In the event of my untimely death, I, Jacob Carter, entrust the ranch to my cousin, Isaac Carter, and—" He paused, savoring each syllable. "Under no circumstance shall outsiders meddle in the affairs of the family estate." The words rippled through the crowd like a match to dry grass. The baker's wife raised her hand to her mouth. A knot of cowhands whistled low. But what struck hardest was the phrase every ear caught: "No outsiders." And in their eyes, outsider meant the colored widow still clinging to Carter Ranch. The ground seemed to sway beneath Selina's feet. Her head roared hollow, all the years of toil, the nights of pain to hold on to each acre, each steer, it felt erased in a stroke of ink. Could even Jacob's memory betray her now? An old man who had known the Carters cleared his throat, speaking to his neighbor. "If that's Jacob's hand, then the land isn't hers no more." "See?" a younger woman whispered back. "Widow or not, colored or not, she was lucky the land held as long as it did." Each word tore deeper. Selina stood tall as she could, but in her pocket, her hand shook beyond her will. Isaac rolled the paper shut, his tone smooth and sure. "I'll carry this to the county judge. But first, let Eden Hollow hear the truth. I am only honoring Jacob's wish." The crowd stirred. Some nodded, some whispered, but the weight of their judgment leaned his way. In their eyes, blood kin outweighed a lone widow every time. Selina could not speak. Her throat burned dry. She searched the faces and found Daniel at the edge of the throng, his gray eyes locked on Isaac, sharp with suspicion. In them she read the look of a man who smelled deceit. But the crowd wanted no proof. They wanted a tale to tell, and Isaac's parchment gave them one. Already she heard it forming. She never had claim. She was only holding what wasn't hers. As the gathering broke apart, voices followed her. Poor Jacob. He'd never want his spread in a stranger's hands. Isaac running it would be proper. Well, that's the end of it. Won't be hers long. Selina turned away, each step toward her wagon like walking barefoot across glass. Shame and helplessness churned together till her chest ached. Daniel came to her, took the reins without a word. He looked into her eyes for a moment, steady, anchoring her against collapse. The ride home passed in silence. Dust whipped up, the wind stung her cheeks, but all she heard were the words Isaac had read. If I die, Isaac shall manage the ranch. Yet in memory, Jacob's voice echoed faint, the voice that once told her, Selina, you must hold this land. No matter what comes, it is yours. That vow was drowned beneath the town's jeers. That night by the fire, Selina opened her hands, studying the rough calluses carved deep into her skin. Is my strength enough? Can I stand when the whole town believes the lie? Outside, the wind pressed against the fence posts, whistling low and hard. It sounded like warning. A storm was already on its way. Night in Eden Hollow pressed heavy, damp as a quilt laid thick across the chest. After the market that day, Selina returned to her house wrapped in silence, her spirit drained near to breaking. In the dim kitchen, the oil lamp cast a wavering glow against stained walls. She sat at the table, head in her hands, letting the crowd's words strike again and again inside her skull. Jacob's will leaves the ranch to Isaac. Never had she felt so stripped bare, not just of dignity, but of memory itself. Jacob, the husband she had trusted, now turned into a weapon against her. If the town believed that scrap of paper Isaac flourished, then soon Carter Ranch would be torn from her hands. And worse, they would say she had never been rightful owner at all. The despair swelled sharp, stinging her eyes. She rose suddenly, staggering as though lost, moving into the bedroom. Like a woman groping through fog, she dragged open trunks, tore through drawers, pulled back blankets, as if some unseen answer might be hidden close. Only when her hand brushed against a loose slat beneath the bed frame did she freeze. A narrow gap showed. She pulled at the plank. From beneath came a wooden box, dust thick upon its lid. She had forgotten it long ago. Jacob had slid it there once, then never spoke of it again. Her fingers shook as she dragged it into the lamplight. The lock was rusted, but unbroken. A thin spark lit within her chest. With trembling hands, she forced it open. Inside lay only a few keepsakes. A faded photograph of Jacob with his parents, a worn handkerchief, and a sealed envelope, the wax still whole. Her heart hammered. She knew Jacob's hand at once on the front. To my wife, Selina. Her grip faltered so that she nearly dropped it. She pressed the envelope to her breast, tears stinging as she pictured Jacob before that last fateful ride, thinking of her, setting down his final words. Breaking the seal, she spread the page beneath the lamp. His familiar hand slanted bold across the paper. Selina, if you are reading this, then the Lord has called me sooner than we wished. All that I own, the cattle, the house, the land, it is yours. No one has the right to claim it, not even my kin. You built this with me, every stone, every fence. It belongs to you, and it always shall. Her throat caught, a sob tearing free, the lines blurred with her tears. Jacob's voice carried on in ink. But land is the lesser thing. What weighs heavier on me is you. I fear you may lock your heart inside grief, never to open again. If it is in God's mercy, I beg you, let yourself love again. Let a man worthy of you stand beside you, carry the load with you. You deserve more than shadows and memory. You deserve a full home. The letter slipped from her hands as she buried her face, sobs rising raw. The tears were bitter, but they carried release. For months she had borne the ache of being abandoned, but here it broke open. Jacob had not forsaken her, he had trusted her, left all in her name. More than that, he had wanted her to live, to love, to step out of sorrow's prison. Through her tears she felt it, as though a hand unseen pressed gentle on her shoulder. This letter shattered Isaac's lie, but it also lifted her from the pit of doubt. The ranch was not town gossip, not Isaac's invention. It was hers by truth, by Jacob's own words. She folded the letter close, pressed it to her chest, whispering through her tears, "I thought you turned away, Jacob, but you never did." Outside, the wind whistled hard against the fence posts, but she did not tremble. Something inside her stood tall, iron beneath the hurt. That night, by the wooden box, Selina knew she had found the strongest weapon against Isaac. Not anger, not rumor, but truth itself. That morning, the square before Eden Hollow's courthouse filled to bursting. Wagons lined the road, horses snorted and stamped, and the air buzzed with talk. Word of Jacob Carter's will had spread through every valley fold, and today the town gathered to see its verdict. Curiosity sharpened their stares. Many came hoping to watch a colored widow stripped of land, of pride, of place. On the courthouse steps stood Reverend James, his hair white as snow, his hands gripping a worn Bible. Isaac Carter soon followed, striding in a dark coat, the swagger of a man who thought the day his own. In his grasp was the same scroll tied with red ribbon. He swept the crowd with a glance, waiting for their approval. "Neighbors," Isaac called, his voice raised, "I come to read the will of my cousin Jacob Carter. By his wish, Carter Ranch belongs to blood, and blood alone." A hum rose, nods here, smirks there. Eyes darted toward Selina, waiting for her fall. She stepped forward from the crowd, clad in plain black, boots powdered with dust. Sun darkened her face but could not hide the calm written there. In her arms she carried a small wooden box, cradled close. Behind her, Daniel stood quiet, gray eyes fixed ahead, watchful as a sentinel. Isaac unfurled his ribboned scroll, drawing out each word. "If I die, let Isaac Carter manage the ranch, and let no outsider intrude upon our family holding." The murmur swelled. "There it is," some said. Jacob spoke plain. The gazes fell heavy on Selina, hungry for the sight of her breaking. But she did not falter. Her voice carried clear. "I too hold a letter, written by Jacob Carter's own hand, its seal untouched, its script beyond any forger. From the wooden box, she drew forth the envelope, wax still unbroken. A hush swept the square. She broke the seal, unfolded the page, and read, "Selina, if you are reading this, the Lord has called me home. All that I own, the house, the herd, the land, is yours. No kin may contest it. You built it with me. It is bound to you forever." The square stilled, breath held. Selina lifted her chin, her voice trembling yet strong. "But more than land, I fear you will bind your heart in sorrow. If you can, let it open again. Let a man who truly loves you stand beside you, bear the weight with you. You deserve a home filled, not only with shadows." The silence deepened until even the wind through the courthouse eaves seemed loud. Every eye shifted from Selina to Isaac. His face blanched, sweat beading at his brow. He stammered, "It's false. All of it." But Reverend James stepped forward, both documents in hand. He fitted his spectacles, studied them long, then lifted his voice. "I knew Jacob Carter. This hand is his without doubt. And this seal, I gave it myself to him on the last Sabbath he attended." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Women raised hands to their mouths. Cowhands looked away, ashamed of their jeers. Selina stood tall, tears brimming, yet her voice steady. "This is the truth. Jacob never turned from me. He left all in my care and wished me to live on. The other paper only the scheme of one who would steal." Daniel moved a step forward, his gaze cold on Isaac. No words needed. The weight of it was enough. Isaac faltered, hands shaking until the forged will slipped from his grasp and dropped to the boards. The whispers turned on him now. "Deceiver. Near fooled the whole town. Shameful." The Reverend raised his Bible high, voice resonant. "Before God and the people of Eden Hollow, the rightful keeper of Carter Ranch is the widow Selina Carter. Any who contest it, contest the Lord's truth." The silence broke into nods, murmurs of assent. Some eyes held respect. Others at least shed their scorn. Selina gripped Jacob's letter tight, her chest flooding with relief and quiet pride. She had held the land, but more, she had kept the truth of her husband's heart. Isaac stood stricken, blood drained from his face. Before him, the fine web he had spun collapsed like sand under storm wind. After the trial on the courthouse steps, Eden Hollow slipped back into its familiar rhythm, yet something in the air had shifted. No longer did whispers trail the colored widow like burrs in the wind. When folks spoke now of Carter Ranch, their words carried new weight, strong, resolute, rightful. Jacob's letter had not only shattered Isaac's scheme, it had lit a fire in Selina's chest, the fire of faith restored. Each morning, as she stepped onto the porch, the lowing of cattle carried across the pasture. Her heart eased at the sound. The herd, once scattered, grazed in calm strength, their hides glossy under the sun. Daniel rose before dawn, unseen by most, walking the fence line, clearing the water ditch. Many times Selina glimpsed his figure in the mist, rope coiled over his shoulder, moving with a quiet steadiness. Where once the ranch bore only her shadow, now it bore two. The townsfolk began to soften. Martha, who once scoffed that Selina was unfit to keep land, brought a loaf of fresh bread, remarking, "It's good to see Carter Ranch lit again." The old blacksmith stopped by with nails and wood, muttering, "To firm the fence." Even the children, who once sang cruel rhymes, now paused to peer at the herd with wide, curious eyes. Selina met these gestures with a nod, neither forgiveness nor pride, but simple acknowledgement. The storm had passed. At midday, the fields glowed gold like spilled honey. Daniel worked at the barn, shirt damp with sweat, shoulders dusted in hay. He hammered down loose shingles left by last year's storm, each strike echoing through the yard. Selina, watering her rows of vegetables, felt a quiet safety stir within her. She had long grown used to doing everything alone. But Daniel's presence, his hand in every small repair, filled the wooden house with something it had not held in years: companionship. That evening, with the sun laying long shadows over the pasture, Selina sat on the porch, cradling a cup of coffee. She had grown used to silence at day's end. But footsteps crossed the boards, and Daniel set another cup before her, sitting opposite with an ease that felt as though he had always belonged. They drank without words. The wind hissed through the fence, the faint bells of cattle tinkling in the distance. When Selina looked up, the fading light brushed his sun-browned face, carving lines of hardship and resolve. She drew breath and said quietly, though steady, "You can go if you wish. The ranch is safe now. I hold no man here." Daniel set down his cup, his gray eyes steady on hers. His voice was deep, sure as the earth beneath them. "I said I'd stay. I don't speak promises lightly." The words, plain as they were, struck her heart like a hammer on stone. In that moment, Jacob's letter rose in her mind. "If you can, let a man who truly loves you step in, stand beside you." Her late husband's blessing and the man before her wove together a chord of fate ringing clear. Selina lowered her gaze, hiding the sting in her eyes. For years, she had braced herself alone, stiff as a fence post against storms. Now truth dawned simple and stark. Someone had truly chosen to remain. Daniel lifted his cup once more, eyes drifting over the meadow. "I've passed through many places," he said, voice low. "None ever asked me to stay. But here feels different." Selina said nothing, only set her hand gently on the table. After a pause, his rough palm rested over it, light but steady. That touch spoke what words never could. Their shadows stretched long across the porch boards, crossing and melding into one. In the pasture, the cattle grazed easy, the bells clinking like the heartbeat of the land itself. Selina closed her eyes and let peace soak through her ribs. When darkness rose and the moon spilled silver on the roof, Daniel rose, circling once more to the fence. Selina lingered, holding her empty cup, chest lighter than it had been in years. In the cool night, she breathed without emptiness. The next day began a new rhythm. Morning found Daniel at the rails, Selina at the milk pail. At noon they shared bread and cold meat under the tree's shade. By dusk they hauled hay together, their laughter rare but real. Tasks were small, yet for Selina the change was immense. She no longer fought alone. Neighbors visited, bearing fruit or simple greetings. No one spoke colored widow anymore. They called her plain and rightful, Mrs. Carter. In that unadorned title lay the town's quiet surrender. One afternoon, beneath the oak, she confessed softly, "I used to fear you'd leave too, as all have left before." Daniel's smile was faint, a weathered thing. "Maybe once I was a man who always left, but some places don't let a man go." Selina met his gaze long, a warmth rising unfamiliar yet tender. In that stillness, she thought of Jacob, and felt sure he was smiling somewhere beyond the clouds. On a moonlit night, she stood at the porch rail, Jacob's letter in hand. Daniel returned from the barn, pausing beside her. Without hesitation, she let him read it. When he finished, he folded it neat, returned it, his eyes locked on hers. He was right. You deserve to be loved again. I believe it too. Her smile trembled as tears slid free. Their shadows lay long across the porch, steady as the new-built fence. Across the pasture, the bells rang on, a hymn of earth and cattle, of endurance and grace. Selena knew her life had turned. Carter Ranch was no longer a widow's burden, but the home of two souls who had chosen to remain. And perhaps you, dear listener, those who have walked far in life, will feel the echo most keenly. For maybe you too once sat beneath a long evening sky, fearing solitude would never break. Selena rose from her dark valley, and when Daniel stayed, she knew at last someone truly remained. This tale is not of land or wills alone. It is of trust, that even when life splinters, a hand may yet reach for ours. And sometimes the bravest act is not to fight alone, but to open the door to shared company. If this story has touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Have you too known a time when someone truly stayed? Tell us, so we may listen together. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so each week we can bring you another story warm and gentle as the evening sun over Eden Hollow.